Hey guys, sorry about this. Welcome to the Doremicomblog channel. This is kind of crazy. I apologize for the delay here. Haven't been painting in a very long time, just trying to get all the supplies needed. I'm going to be using not the top of the line brushes, but again, just got to get back into it. And so I've decided that our first miniature to paint will be the Cami of Choking Fog. And I went back and forth on whether or not I should prime this black or white, but it just seemed like I'm going to probably repaint everything anyways. So I picked the prime bottle that had been open the absolute longest. We're going to be using Master Series paint by Reaper. One of them was just something that I recently bought that is cloudy gray. And by the way, let me know if the volume is too loud or quiet. And the other all came from one of the previous, I think it was Reaper Bones 2 Master Series high density pigment, and it is solid black, solid white, and concrete gray. So first thing I need to do is determine whether or not concrete gray or cloudy gray, which one's the darker one. Whichever one's the darker one's the one I'm going to go ahead and kind of put back on top of the prime black. And I don't know if you can see this. Let me put this into frame a little bit. I didn't have any paper towels down here, so I am using quite literally a puppy pad. Unbelievably absorbent, so it should be fine. Okay, that's pretty dark. Okay, so it looks like cloudy gray is going to be a little bit darker, so we'll start with that. Kind of painting back over the miniature and giving it more of a sense of depth. This is my first, by the way, live broadcast for Facebook, and I definitely will be also posting this on the Doremicomblog channel. So one other thing about this miniature, it comes in two parts, and this part right here is kind of like an extension hand. You can kind of glue in a whole magnitude of ways. It doesn't really sit in there in a very distinctful way. So I imagine that a lot of the different choking fogs actually look different. And I'm being kind of liberal with the paint because I just kind of want it to go everywhere for right now. And it has, right now I'm painting where it kind of has some eyes and then some teeth. You can kind of see the demon coming through. Sorry for the earlier misstart. I started it up and I accidentally I didn't realize that I'm using XSplit, and so I didn't realize that it was streaming already to Facebook, and that's my bad. My understanding is that the WGC has a hangout, and I just didn't know how to get involved with that. So if this is the kind of video, or for hobbyists, if this is the kind of video, although it's so basic, like this is not going into any super detail. So I have an airbrush. A question was asked, do I not use an airbrush? I have an airbrush, and I haven't gotten to it just yet. I actually have a fairly sizable terrain project that I will be using it on because I want to kind of get used to it before I try doing it with miniatures. And since I've had some exposure to painting miniatures with brush, I'm just going to do that for this one. This is super basic, and like I said, I haven't painted a model in probably 3 years. So this is just me getting back into it. It's very interesting because I guarantee you there are probably a ton of little tips and tricks that you can use with an airbrush. Definitely the case for using brushes as well. You know, the whole dry brushing and wet blending and all sorts of things like that. And like I said, this is just kind of laid back. Plus, I also don't know if when I airbrush, if I could actually do this live. Oh, I'm sure airbrushes would make this way easier. I just haven't broken it out yet. And the other big thing is that I don't have as many paints in airbrush colors. I think I only have like 4. And it's not this range of like shades of gray. Although, you know, I might actually change this up and actually make the eyes and the mouth look a little bit different than gray and make them kind of pop out a bit. So I'm just using the trays that I'm using are literally the Bushido tray. So this is where the miniatures were. This is the back. A lot of people will be like, oh my gosh, if you haven't been painting that long, how do you have all your Infinity miniatures painted? And straight up, there's a awesome friend of mine who lives in Wisconsin who paints the vast majority, and the ones that he doesn't paint, there are a handful of painters that I trust in my neighborhood or around here, one of which is Carl. You guys might know him from the Infinity forums and whatnot. So one of the things too, a lot of people use airbrushes and whatnot for getting a sense of gradient, and you will notice that the style that I paint in is typically designed for the, I want it to actually have high contrast. So it's not going to be in everyone's taste, but whatever. And yeah, typically I do thin down non-airbrush. Oh, you thin down non-airbrush paints to use in your paintbrush. That's an interesting take, and I'm sure there's probably ways to do it where it's not just water, and it's probably better for the airbrush. So again, not having the exposure to, oh man, to using an airbrush just yet. I don't want it to be a bad first experience, I guess. I don't know how to. I intentionally added a little bit of green stuff in the bottom to kind of make it look like it was, the smoke was kind of coming up out of the ground. I don't know how well that worked, but we'll see. Alright. We'll let that dry for just a minute. Is the audio coming through fine? Awesome. We're using a wireless mic here, and I really like the quality of it, but every once in a while it gets finicky when the batteries start running low. And I changed them out this morning, did some filming. It isn't edited yet, so I don't have anything going up just yet, but stuff will be coming. All right, now. What's up, Dennis? So Dennis Gates, my friend, is the guy who paints the vast majority of my Infinity stuff, and he does an amazing job. Oh, come on. Of course I did that. It's not a real gaming table until you mess it up. All right, so did a pretty thin coat of paint, so it feels like it's not tacky or anything. Feels like it's dried. So I'm going to go back through, really wet down my blacks to have it sink into the crevices. I'm trying pretty hard to keep it in the camera angle while I'm doing this. A little trickier than I thought it was going to be. For people who do this kind of stuff on Facebook, how do you manage to film it? I guess, you know what, I probably could rearrange it so that the camera's kind of in front of me and it looking at the miniature. Maybe that's a good way to do it. So excuse me while I change. This is my D&D table. Underneath this wood is the actual gaming surface, as well as the TV for playing back through the TV monitor, the game. So I'm going to change position just slightly. Sorry for the bumpiness. I think the net result will be kind of easier for everyone. Maybe I shouldn't travel quite so far for the water. Wow. Did figure out one other thing though. It's probably not light enough, so let me get a little more light moved over here. Dennis, is this a much better angle? Can you see it a little bit better? Maybe bring it down just a little bit more. And is it still in focus? Probably not super focused. Let's see if we can make that a little bit better. So all I'm doing right here is using the high density paint, watering it down. The pigment is actually, it's not really coming through in the camera very well, but it actually is doing a really good job of maintaining its color even though it's watered down, and applying it into the crevices. So just heard that the Patriots won the Super Bowl. I was really rooting for Matt Ryan to finally get a win. Okay, so now that we have highlighted or brought it back to a kind of a neutral color based on the colors that I have available to me from the prime of black, and now deep shading. Gonna let it dry for just a little bit, and then I'm gonna start providing some highlights on top. Model's just a little too wet to apply the next layer, so we gotta let it dry for a little bit longer. So I'm gonna go back through and delete the post where I had just started and I hadn't actually gotten anything. Wow, I must have posted a whole bunch. So to everyone who came out to the earlier broadcast, I do apologize. Adding some kind of extreme dry brushing white highlights to the cami. What's off camera just slightly is where I'm using the dog puppy pad to dry out the paint, and that way I'm only applying the dry brush strokes to the highest elevations of the model. It's tricky when you're deciding how to paint your models if your intention is to have it videotaped for YouTube, which mine is for this one. And the reason is that if I make any part of this model too bright, like just too white, it will have some issues when I bring it into the camera frame dealing with white balancing of the video. At the same time, if you don't make some kind of extreme highlighting paint color choices, it's really kind of difficult to know what you're looking at, because the miniatures are so small, and when you're looking at kind of a big area, I mean, this is fairly zoomed in, so imagine if I'm playing on a 2x2 table, if I don't have this model painted in such a way that it stands out and you know what it is, so trying to focus in on just the right balance between the two is sometimes tricky. And on this model especially, even though it's kind of smoky, I really want that face to really stand out on the model. So I might have to introduce different colors. I'm going to be picking up this model and kind of turning it upside down, so if that's a little difficult to see or if it's out of frame, I do apologize. I really wanted a basic model to kind of get my feet wet back, get my feet in wet so I can get back into painting. And this seemed like the right choice. Hard to really make a mistake per se on this model. It's just a matter of how well you execute how you're trying to show off the fog. We're going to let that sit for just a second. I'm going to go see if I got some different paint colors to really pop out the teeth and the eyes on the model. Alright, we're going to try Witchcraft Purple and Pale Saffron, a yellow of sorts. So don't know if you can see this or not, but the eyes have been adding the purple to it. I think I'm going to mix some of the purple and the black together and then reintroduce it as a a shadow through some of the model. I just don't know if that's going to muck it up. If anyone has insight into that, let me know what they think before I attempt to do it. Yep, that's definitely one of those things where I need to stop not adding the dark purple back into it. This is one of those times when less is more. So this is where we're at. We haven't added the saffron into the teeth yet. Probably do one more white highlighting and then that'll be complete. I'm going to let this guy dry a little bit, make sure the color contrast stays in place. This might seem, again, very, very high contrast, but that's partially because of the webcam that I'm using, not distributing because I'm looking right now at the broadcast and the model, and the broadcast makes it look like it's globs of white, and that's just not the case. For the YouTube video, when I put this together and stick it out on Doremicomblog, what I'll do is I'll take some photos with non-flash photography, and it'll help not show you what actually came from this smoke creature, and pretty happy with it actually. All right, guys, thank you so much for coming out and visiting, and I will talk to you all soon.